Welcome to this episode of Sunny's Silver Linings. Sunny's guest today is Jon Murchison, founder and CEO of Blackpoint Cyber. In this episode, they chat about early threat detection, challenges MSPs face offering defensible and profitable security stacks, overcoming these challenges, and so much more. And now, your host, the founder and CEO of IT by Design, Mr. Sunny Kayla. Over to you, Sunny.
Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Sunny. Thanks for having us. And it's great seeing you at the Build IT event the other week. You guys did a great job with that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for your partnership there. We truly appreciate your partnership.
Oh, likewise, of course. Of course.
You are the expert. You don't need an introduction. Everyone knows you in the channel. But can
Maybe.
you give me...
I hope they do. Probably not. Yeah.
You have been in the channel. I have seen you at many different events in the last few years, especially. So I want to start with, how did you get into cybersecurity, Jon?
Yeah, honestly, it started with IT, right? So, I came down and grew up in Buffalo, came down to University of Maryland, obviously to go to school, play sports for them. It was years ago, my brother kind of got me into the Cisco game. So he gave me a bunch of books in college and I got my CCNA in the late 90s. So I actually started down the IT path, specifically kind of on the Cisco routing and switching game. And that's, so I did that, I did Windows domain administration, all that type of fun stuff. But then I ended up working for the National Security Agency for, between Govy and contractor times, about 12 years there, give or take a few months. That was really how I got introduced to, kind of cybersecurity or computer network operations writ large. In my experience, I found actually having a strong IT background and networking actually is probably one of the greatest foundational skills. Yeah. If you get into kind of threat hunting, there's a couple tracks you can take, Sonny. You can be more on the software engineer path, and that'll make you really good at reverse engineering and understanding maybe how to develop exploits and backdoors, and then the actual put it into use. If you're on the offensive side or defending on the other side, I actually think IT skills tee you up to be a little bit more effective on that front. So, you need both for sure. But that's ultimately how I got into it.
Yeah, no, that's the best way. So when you have the system admin knowledge, because I was one.
Right, yeah.
For a small, medium-sized business here in New York City. And that's when you kind of learn the overall 360 of a business network, that you're not, it's not like SME of just one thing. Right. Kind of having that foundation where you get a complete perspective on how networks work. And then that gives you a lot of understanding when there's any kind of security attack. You got to really be able to understand how things are impacted, how things work right. in a business network. And when you have that type of background and you work for agency, that's the best way to learn, and that environment is world class to learn. So yeah, but so my follow-up question there is, why do you think your background uniquely positions Blackpoint to be a leader in threat detection and response technology? The overall, what do you do? Yeah. How your background helped you being an expert?
Yeah, I think, I'll set the table. I think, in general, if you take a software engineer, and this is maybe too generalized, but at a high level, this is kind of how I see it. If you take a software engineer, and you ask them to be a hacker, this is some of the biggest brain work, right? So they're going to be working on finding, vulnerabilities in software that can develop code execution techniques, also known as an exploit, to gain your remote access. They're going to be great at persisting their malware through reboots and things like that. And that's one part of the approach. And so most folks with that knowledge are going to be very adept at writing software which looks a lot more like antivirus or EDR, which is really focused on catching the malicious tool set an adversary would use. If you're more on the IT side, and maybe you're a guy that would take a collection of malicious tool sets and use them on the keys, so more like a red team or pen tester. And obviously skills where you have a little of both are probably the most effective, some coding, scripting, along with the more of the IT and hacking skills. You find they're going to target tradecraft or behavior more. So to take a step back, I jokingly say, but it was true. We were kind of the bad guys for the right team. And I think a lot of times we give the adversary too much credit for having perfect knowledge when they land in an environment, and we get overly fixated on the malware, the exploit. Now, obviously, the exploits are really important to understand and lock down with patching and things like that as fast as you can. But I always felt there was a part of the hack that was completely malware independent that had, frankly, the most observables. And that's really what some people call behavior. We would call it tradecraft. And that's the act when you land in an organization as an adversary, figuring out where you are, what level your creds are at, where you can spread. And this is where IT fundamentals become incredibly important as a defender, right? So understanding simple things like you just can't see other subnets, right? When you're on one computer, like broadcasts don't pass between subnets. You need to understand some basics in routing, understanding how Windows domain infrastructure is designed so you can enumerate other accounts to go after, you can enumerate other devices. So, I think it's really that experience of kind of being the bad guy for the right team shapes, it's not that we use any specific knowledge, to be totally clear, but it shapes an approach that is very tradecraft detection heavily, augmented by malware detection. And I think it's played out in reality, and this is actually not knocking any of these technologies at all. In fact, they're causing some of it. But in our threat ops center, right, we do manage detection and response, and run a 24/7 shop. 86% of our responses weren't alerted on by malware or AV. And that's because it's not because those tools are bad, actually. It's because they got pretty good at catching the malware, but the behavior side, the live off the land techniques that you can use, like Black Cat Ransomware Group loves using IT tools instead of actual hacker tools to do their job. I think having that approach and that appreciation for both sides allowed us to develop a platform that merges the highest fidelity intelligence from both the anti-malware and the tradecraft or behavior detection side. And that's where a lot of our IP sits. So I think, and that allows you to have a really fast decision tree. And so for us, I think that's why it was really an appreciation for that phase of the breach that's actually hard on the adversaries, figuring out where you are, figuring out how to enumerate, and figuring out how to spread. And so we focus a lot of our detection on that. And the funny part for our threat intel group is sometimes they don't get threat intel as much as they'd want in malware because we tend to stop it before the bad guys put their good stuff down. So interesting nuance there, but that's, I think, probably the most direct answer I can give to your question.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Sure.
You talk to a lot of partners as well. When it comes to challenges MSPs are facing to kind of create an offering where they can scale with profitability.
Right.
So what are the top challenges that they face to kind of really leverage this?
Yeah, I think to me, the biggest challenges we're hearing is really pricing, packaging, positioning on a security stack and how that fits into their contract model. As there's a lot of different models in MSP. Some bill per user, some bill per device, some have several packages, and some have a single package.
Yeah.
And so what I'm seeing a lot on the pricing side to start with is an MSP is, let's say they sold 40 customers and they have an existing contracts, but the game changed in that year or 2-year contract, whatever their term was, and they need to add more security capabilities. But now they're stuck and they've been historically in this upselling game on security. Like, I'm going to upsell you in DNS protection. I'm going to upsell you on some add-on licenses for your next gen firewall or UTM. And now I want to bring EDR or MDR. At the end of the day, the end customer, frankly, most of them don't have a clue of what they're talking about in the tech standpoint. And so I think the challenge of not standardizing on a security stack, and the one question I would ask is, if you're a business and your job is to serve other businesses, how many of them, deserve to have less protection and be hacked under your watch, right? And the reality is you wouldn't want any of them, even if they didn't sign up for your Security Plus package, because it's a brand reputation issue for sure. So I think for me, the challenge is there's so much FUD selling from the security vendor community, right? There's so many options, so many startups, so much VC money is pumped into this, everyone, even if the products aren't even the same, are making the same claims. It's a really big challenge for the MSP on the consuming side to sort through the real stuff and the stuff that's BS, right? And so what we see is if a product's like in that 1 to 3 endpoint range, they're all in, or dollars an endpoint, they're all in, even if the efficacy isn't very good. And so I think, from my standpoint, the key is to really run kind of your cost of goods modeling on your pricing model and figure out the simplest one where the security offering is baked in, right? And you got to look towards other areas to gain efficiencies, automate, right? Obviously, one of the most expensive and hardest to find resources for an MSP, and your business helps a lot with this, is finding qualified folks that can work for you, right? And it's a big cost center. So I think for me, that pricing, packaging, and then how you present it to the end customer is a big challenge. I see MSPs really, really struggle with post-sales customer success on a security product, because the sale is always, I sold you the security product, now show me what you caught. Well, here's the secret. Most people aren't hacked, right? You might have some incidents here, little ones, but like a true one where someone's going to smash you and it's company existence threatening doesn't happen that much. So getting into a mindset of trying to sell like this cause and effect, there's a huge threat, so we rolled this out. Insurance doesn't work that way. You don't cancel your homeowner's insurance because you didn't have a fire, right? So I think it's a lot of that positioning is a big side, and then the packaging, because there's so much confusion. So we have some, I think, more simple ways to break it down so you can wrap your mind around it. But that's what I'm seeing predominantly.
When it comes to strategies, John, so
Right.
what are like kind of some actionable advice that you can offer to our MSP friends, where while the noise is there, while security frameworks are missing in some of the solution providers, they don't have, they don't have good adoption of a security framework, but they're buying tools. So what is your advice, actionable advice, so that they can price, package, and position correctly, especially now in this tough economic climate that's coming our way, that they're successful during that economic climate?
Yeah. So what I'm going to say, I want to give credit. This is like part NIST framework and a bit of Sunil used as well in the cyber defense matrix. We've modified a little bit of the language, but at a high level, if I'm running an MSP, I want to come out. Obviously, security is top of mind. I want to come out with the security first approach marketing. So when you sign up with MSP XYZ, listen, we are a security first. It's based on a standard. Here's how our thing works, and it's delivered in layman's terms. We got to stop nerding out in this game and stop selling on FUD and stop trying to play this gotcha game with vulnerability scanning or whatever. And it's part of the sales approach. And I would put it as follows: there's kind of 5 core pillars, right? If you're to protect any organization, large or small, from networking. First, you have to know what you're actually protecting. This is the asset identification phase. Second, you have to have a functional approach where you're hardening the environment. This is really called reducing the attack surface. That's the second pillar. Third, you need a detection approach that is not solely based on detecting the malicious tool set of the adversary. So when we talk malware detection, we need to also be able to identify behavior tradecraft. So many times this looks more like what the MSPs do every day. This is highly privileged IT operations, everything from like mounting privileged share drives to whatever, to a good best-in-class kind of malware detection from your favorite AV or EDR. Third, response should not be thought of as just post-breach, like where it's, and breach is kind of a legal term, so I should be careful, but post-intrusion, where you're trying to understand why you got encrypted or what files are stolen. That's too late. I consider that right of boom. So when we talk response, it needs to be real time. And this is something that you can focus. And when we talk real time, we don't mean like days later. It needs to be like minutes to an hour, or less. And then lastly, you should focus. The 5th pillar is recovery. If all those things fail, how do I live to fight another day as a business and reduce the damage? So, when we talk asset, and we talk about a lean, efficient stack. When we talk about asset visibility, you have an RMM, and probably some vulnerability scanning are great two ways to cover that. Second, the vulnerability scanning helps tee up the next area, which is hardening. So this is when we think hardening, this is where you kind of now want to base it. So your first 5 pillars, you can say kind of based on NIST best practices. The implementation of the hardening and the reducing your attack surface, I think there's only one framework that I've seen out there that I actually really believe in, and it's called CIS. They have their kind of benchmarks and controls, but the Center for Internet Security and all their literature is pretty much free up on their website. I would definitely leverage that, because the big difference is it doesn't say like most of the compliance frameworks where it's like you must have an ability to detect malicious activity, or it tells you actually what to configure, what to harden. It's prescriptive. And like I tell everyone in the cybersecurity game, details are the only thing that matters, because that's what the bad guys take advantage of, but we can't sell it that way. Right. So second pillar, hardening, follow CIS. Third pillar, detection. This is where you want part kind of anti-malware and part highly privileged tradecraft detection, kind of like where a lot of our core IP sits. And then the third pillar is response. Sending an email in the middle of the night from, a company that's maybe doing log monitoring or SIEM as a service, that doesn't get it done for your end customer when you need action. So you have to have a hammer, because at the end of the day, we've all decided to connect our businesses, which in 2022, most are completely reliant on a functional IT environment, up to the worst neighborhood in the world called the internet from a virtual standpoint. So that's where you need a meaningful kind of ability to respond no matter what the time of day is. And lastly, on the recovery side, this is where we're talking insurance. This is where we're talking great cloud backups, things like that, tabletop exercises. And I would lead with that approach when I brief it to the customer. Like, when you come with us as an MSP, we follow security best practices and then get on to the rest of it, because that confidentiality, integrity, and really continuity of operations is one of the biggest concerns. And, let's face it, small, medium business, especially if you're in manufacturing, logistics, or an ambulatory care center or smaller hospitals, they go down really, really, really hard when this goes sideways. And so we have, I think, a bit of a moral obligation to make sure those customers who their entire livelihood might be in the business they're running, to protect it. That's why I don't like this premium upsell and these layers, even though I know there's economic challenges. I would rather encourage MSPs, and this isn't just because we're in the security business, I think this is just smart business, to focus on ensuring the protection of that environment to their best knowledge, and look for efficiencies in other places, whether it's through automation, to make the economics work out.
Okay, so no, thank you for sharing that. CIS is what I heard you recommend.
CIS, oh, it's a great one. CIS and those 5 pillars, kind of those, that kind of NIST, Sunil, you type
John,
right
I hear sometimes, very kind of very, very concerning stories from MSPs where the owner had cybersecurity insurance and something happened to their end customer, and now end customer is suing them, and they are kind of they thought their cyber security insurance covered them, but then they got to know that, okay, this was missing in terms of on the MSP side. So that insurance is not, they don't end up covering that claim.
Right.
So what can MSPs do to make sure that they are, or they are covered from their expectation point of view? Their expectations are met when it comes to cybersecurity insurance covering them.
Boy, that is a loaded question, because it's like shifting under our feet as we speak. So, at a high level, Sunny, as you know, when it comes to cyber insurance, there's probably not an asset class worse than MSPs for the carriers, right? Because you can hit one, you have remote monitoring management tools. If those get compromised, you can hit everything at once. So by nature, the insurers, and learning the hard way, have had a really tough go at making this work. I mean, the London market pulled back massively in the past 2 years. And I think it's incumbent upon any business owner, small or large, to really understand and think about their business with like a more of a big picture risk mitigation program. Part of that is insurance, in addition to kind of, the suite of other things we just talked about. And I think a lot of folks need to understand the difference between tech E&O insurance which, can help with your downtime and errors and omissions, and cyber, which are two different things. And so I think it's step one. I know our head of insurance, Chris Wilkerson, over at our Blackpoint Risk, operation, briefed at your conference, Build IT, and he was covering just this topic, actually, because I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge on how the insurance game works. At the same time, we're seeing rates go way up, and coverage specifically for ransom go way down. And so what I'm seeing is the carriers are still wrestling with this, hence that the applications are like 25 pages. And I think a lot of times 24 of the pages don't need to be asked, but they're trying to figure it out because it's not like there's actuarials here. So to me, rolling in with that security first approach, following CIS, and thinking about it through a asset identification, hardening, detection, that whole 5-pillar thing is going to make you eminently more insurable, because guess what? The carriers are doing external vulnerability scanning on what they can find already as part of your application process. I think it's only wise, when you think about something so risky, to think that there's going to be more and more requirements coming down onto the MSP that's going to force their hand into this model anyway. It's either going to force their hand, or it's going to force them to be uninsurable and risk not being a viable business. So to me, I think it's really important to, one, understand what coverage actually gets you, read the fine print, and two, stop piecemealing your security strategy. Get one, standardize on it, understand the economics. And one other just add on to this is I see, and this is it's well-intentioned. I see MSP all the time trying to test the efficacy of their security, but they test it in a way that doesn't look like real hacking and isn't real. And it leaves them either with a false sense of gaps in their security coverage or a false sense of security. And this is why I really think it's important to hire professionals that actually know how to break into networks, know the fundamentals. If it's a double click script that's going to go out and do adversary emulation, that should be your warning sign to go hire a pen testing team to come in and test. And then don't give them too many rules of engagement. Let them, there's certain things that are hard to do in real life hacking. And some of those are your best triggers and indicators. So you got to let the guys do it for real, instead of double clicking and giving them access. I think that's a really important area. I think just because we're all in IT, that doesn't equal we know how to hack or break into things. We might understand the concepts, but in practice, that doesn't make us a great judge on efficacy.
That's great advice, John. Because I have seen some MSPs go out of business just because in the last couple of years, they did not do what they were supposed to do. And then now just kind of one incident. Yeah. So at the end of the day, why entrepreneur works, John, and especially nowadays, there's just so much M&A happening in the channel. At the end of the day, entrepreneur wants value creation for the team, for the overall stakeholders. So how can, cybersecurity being big part of your overall valuation, how can MSPs build value in their business by using security first strategy?
It's a great question. So obviously security is not the end all be all for value creation. However, it's becoming really important. It's a couple of ways. One, good rule of thumb with any business is to come up with a repeatable approach that works on the vast majority of your customers. So when you get into this game of all this a la carte and upsells and all this, you're immediately outside of that repeatable approach. You're now more into the game of I'm building a house and I'm looking for the next house to build tomorrow. So step one, I think, is getting a really repeatable business model. In combination with that, when you bake it in and you're not having to now explain the value of these products, let's say there was no activity, you can't make it up. Now trying to explain all these one-off products you sold, you want to get out of that entire game. You want to go, and then you can give a big picture update to your customer on the value of the security ecosystem, because obviously there's going to be some detection with all your different tools, but what you really want to show is hygiene before you onboarded them, hygiene after, right? And give them a view into kind of that, the value you've driven there, aside from catching, hackers. I think delivering some threat intelligence to them, not in a scary way, but in a pragmatic, this is the state of the world, really, really important. all of that goes to making a repeatable process that I think will up your renewal rates. And as we all know, and you know, Sonny, running a business, you know, gross retention on revenue, and kind of that lifetime value of your contract, you know, over your cost of acquisition is incredibly important for any prospective acquirer, right? So I think it starts with that package that's repeatable, that applies to everyone, where the economics work. I think that will lead to greater retention. That immediately is creating institutional value. Now, here's the next step of that. I think you're going to watch. There's a ton of M&A I see going on in this space right now where I think the acquirers are like, I want to look at their security posture. I just don't know how perfectly just yet, right? Expect that to change. Expect that to change. So if you're not eating your own dog food as an MSP and running your own operation and your own network based on those 5 pillars, leveraging CIS, that is going to be looked at as a mark against you when you go to exit. And guess what? You might have an incident going on that you didn't even realize because you didn't invest with it. That would be the surefire way to ensure that deal gets either devalued or doesn't happen. So I think there's 2 parts to it. It can help your retention rates. It can frankly simplify your accounting and bookkeeping. And 3, it creates value to make sure you have your own house in order on exit, because I think our MSP industry is undergoing a rapid maturity change in security, and those that don't jump on are going to be left behind, and they might be the ones getting picked up for, you know, pennies on the dollar, where it's an exit to stay in business as opposed to an exit to make money as an owner. So I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, no, it did. Repeatable being the key word, because repeatable is what makes a business valuable. It makes it a platform.
Right.
When someone can, I mean, if it's muscle and feel every day, then you can't really invest in business. But when there's something that's repeatable, and that's what creates value. But one more follow-up question there, John, is, I mean, part of value creation is also IP, right? So an MSP world is kind of buying security tools and then kind of having that stack and selling it, right? So there's no kind of real IP. Is there anything, or have you seen any MSPs where they have done something to have at least their flavor of cybersecurity as a practice, where where their multiple has that IP included in that? So basically, what can MSPs do? How can they at least do something in the area of IP? Yeah,
so I think with MSPs and even MSSPs, there's very few that have IP like a SaaS company, if that makes sense. Where I've built this platform, it's monetized. However, I think the IP, the strongest IP for an MSP is maybe not going. And listen, if you're a massive one, you're doing huge revenue and you can invest and bring in the money to go build new products, do it. No one would know that business better than you, right? Running it. However, I think the IP is really in the health of the business, in the machine that you've built. Everything from lead acquisition, what does your front of the funnel look like? So it's the whole machine that comes together. How do you convert? Understanding the difference between MQLs, SQLs, your conversion rates, what it costs to bring on board you. So I think, and then having a detailed metric tracking on everything from customer satisfaction, your tickets, response time, in really orchestrating, frankly, the hell out of your business from a data standpoint, and building those into like Power BI dashboards, some sort of kind of business intelligence. This is like telemetry. This is like telemetry coming off your car or a missile or any kind of high-end machine to show how well it's working. And when you have a business that has the metrics to back it up and you have the platform to show it, to me, for an MSP, that could probably be the greatest value creation in ensuring you get those multiples you want if you decide to exit. I think it's really, really important they focus on that, as opposed to maybe trying to invent a new product. Now, if they want to invent a new product and have it, do it. But just another rule of business is make sure you don't go jump down a path that's so outside of your comfort zone it becomes a distraction from what you do really well.
Yeah. So what I hear you say is that it's more of building that machine as your unique capability by acquiring these capabilities, but having your own way of kind of delivering that capability,
delivering.
right? So
Yeah.
pricing, packaging, it comes back to that, those 3 Ps that you mentioned: price, package, position in your unique way. That it's your capability that no one else has, and as MSP, and that's what will build that self-managed capability that kind of is valuable, right?
Yeah.
And so thank you so much. Really,
this is great.
I enjoyed the conversation. Very valuable insights and actionable advice for our MSP friends. I truly appreciate you, John, and thank you so much for coming to my podcast.
Sonny, thanks for having me on, and thanks for all you guys do for the MSP space. Much appreciated.
Thank you, John.
All right, see ya.